Hello and welcome to the Evergreen Athlete Podcast. My name is Finlay McHugh and I'm here to help people over the age of 30, particularly those that were involved in sport before, to train, to perform and to regain or remain as athletic as they possibly can. I'm going to be taking some of the science and also real world experiences, not just from myself, but from guests on here, to be able to give you some practical tips on how to build a healthier, more balanced life and be able to reach your potential. So I want to start this podcast, and this is the third on consistency and being able to remain consistent. But I want to start by actually just talking about my own training. So for those that don't know, I take part in I'm the most amateur weightlifter, Olympic weightlifter you can possibly think of. I've done it for approximately, it must be 12 years by now. It's something that I started as I was gaining accreditations for the career as a strength and conditioning coach, and just learned to love. It's a skill, it's quite technical, and I've always applied myself in those kind of sports. But in the last couple of weeks, I've actually been able to hit some new lifetime bests in various different strength lifts that feed into this. That is rep maxes for back squats, that's rep maxes for bench press, certain other kind of derivative lifts. And probably about 2 to 3 weeks ago, I was messaging my coach going oh my God, things are going so well. I cannot wait to be able to translate this into the main sport, the main lifts. And he was enthusiastic as well. And now fast forward to 2 weeks and I've had 3 of probably the worst training sessions ever. And when you go through those, you have that high and when you have that low, for me, it breeds doubt. I start to think to myself am I actually ever going to get better? Or have I hit my peak potential? Am I investing too much time in something that I'm not really making a lot of progress? And then I think it's quite easy, or I've definitely found myself falling into a comparison trap where I'm looking at other people that perhaps I used to train with a while ago, looking at people who are much more proficient in the sport and just wondering whether, is it just natural talent? And is it why does success seem to come so easy for some people? And I think this is a really common trap. It's something I've felt before. It's something that now I'm actually more acutely aware of to expect. And I think these feelings, this stress, this doubt can really push people off course when they have invested a good chunk of time in something to progress. And this is kind of where I want to circle around today, is progression. And making progress is a really important part of remaining consistent. I think as in human nature, we want to know that the time that we're investing in something, whether it's financial resources, is having a return. And that actually comes round into a self-determination theory. This might have been something that people have heard of before, but it's a key theory when it comes to motivation. It's also something that I did my undergraduate thesis on. And what is self-determination theory? It basically is that kind of the core of human motivation comes down to relatedness. So that is, how relevant is the work that I'm doing to the outcome I want? Do I feel like I'm a part of this project? Do I feel like it's useful to me? Autonomy. Do I feel like I have a say and I have actual input? And then lastly, competency, as in, am I good at this? Am I extracting something? Do I see progress? Progress is baked into a core thing of motivation. And when we feel motivated, we are more likely to be consistent. So what I want to talk about now is what you can do to ensure that you are making as much progress as you possibly can, signs to spot when it might not be happening, and also more broadly, how your mindset should be when it comes to outcomes. I think in essence, a mistake that I've actually made, I've made it very recently as well, particularly when starting up Evergreen, is making the initial program for people sometimes just that little bit too much of a stretch for them at the beginning. And something that I have to reinforce with myself with my own programming is that it's vital when you start, or when someone starts training, that you undertrain someone very, very slightly. But there is a physiological reason for that as well. It's much easier to be able to train and build up, whereas if you apply a lot more intensity and volume to someone's training very early on, it's going to be much harder to bring them back down and there's a risk of injury. But more on a behavioral sciences, when you start smaller and with something that somebody can definitely accomplish, you start to build some wins. You start to feel confident that you can achieve it. You start to tick things off as you go, and seeing that builds a bit of progress. So for example, My goal for this was to film 5 podcasts in a week. Now, this is actually episode 4, and I don't think I'm going to have time for episode 5. And I could be beating myself up going, God, I can't believe I failed. I set 5, it's easy. There were 5 days in the week, 1 a day. Why the fuck haven't you been able to do that? When in reality, I've gone from 0 to 4. So I need to be really happy about that. And I think that can apply to people's training, exercise as well. So starting slow starts to build some wins. And that is also tied into, again, some good science of like when you do look at people that are like habitual winners, and I say that broadly, there's people that habitually achieve, because as soon as you achieve something, you release this little bit of testosterone in your body, and it allows people to take I guess more risk-taking behaviors, or basically to put their like hat in the ring for different activities, to be able to put their hand up and move forwards, and they feel confident because they've had that experience before. So I think building those wins makes someone want to do a bit more and be willing to do more and push forward that. So it is important that you start to feel like you've had progress. The second thing, I think this is a really common thing that I come across many of my current clients, is rewarding yourself when you have achieved that. So it may feel like it is inconsequential, you haven't achieved the big outcome, but when you do something, what is the reward mechanism that you are putting in place to reinforce the reason why you've done it? So it could be, I've done my training this morning and I'll reward myself with a barista-made coffee afterwards, rather than a homemade French press plunger, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't need to be a Gucci handbag or, I don't know, whatever is valuable to you materialistically. It can be something small just to reinforce that the behavior and that was good, so that when it comes to thinking about whether I'm going to do it again, I start going, actually, I really quite like a coffee, so I'll make sure I do my training session, whatever that might be. And that reward mechanism, again, it's all just going into this big melting pot of tactics and strategies that are going to help perpetuate and move you further forwards. Now, I think the next thing is really relevant if you are an older athlete. And I do mean anyone realistically that is over the age of 30. You could probably even go a bit lower than that. But over the age of 30, you have a job, you have potentially a family, you have a lot of other commitments than you had before. And that is, how can you amplify the training response? So let's take this back a step and revisit something I'm not too sure if I've spoken about on the podcast, but I've definitely written about it in other areas, is that training needs to be seen as a dose much like a dose of medicine. So when we provide a dose of medicine, a stress on our body, we go into a stage of recovery where we cannot perform as well as we did prior to that dose. But over 24, 48 hours, we return. We actually typically come back better than when we were before. And we are ready for our next dose of medicine or next dose of exercise. There are lots of things that are going on in our lives at around 30 plus that are going to make that turning one bit of exercise into 2 bits of results much harder. Or not much harder. It's going to make it harder if we are not aware of what it is. And I think a key reason why people feel like it's harder to make progress when they're older and blame their age is because of other lifestyle factors, not necessarily what is going on in your body. And there are definitely things going on in your body, and I'm not going to dispute that, but there are much bigger, more impactful things happening in your life. So the first thing I'll touch on, and it's almost a cliche these days, is sleep. Because when we are asleep, that is a key phase in our day where our body is resetting, it is replenishing, it is rebuilding. And the more sleep that we can get, the more hormones we are going to be secreting, and that is going to set off a cascade of events in our body, and we are going to come back better. And I've experienced that firsthand. When just before I had Alfie, I think I had the best year of training ever. And the key thing was I was going to bed. I used to have an alarm that went off at 4:30 a.m. in the morning. And all of a sudden I was like, why am I staying up till 11 o'clock? I feel terrible. And I brought it right back to 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then waking up without an alarm. And I was making more progress than I'd actually done at any other point in my life. And then juxtapose that, as soon as you have a kid, your sleep is sporadic, it's in small doses, you're getting less quantity and quality. And I found myself doing the same training and breaking down, feeling more pain, discomfort, lots of other things going on. And now, as Alfie has started to sleep a lot better, I can start to get more from it. And sleep, the reason we need a lot of sleep is that in later phases of sleep, we are going to be excreting more of these hormones. So that is testosterone, that is human growth hormone. These hormones are going to be coming out and starting a cascade of events to repair our bodies. So that is the first thing. And if you do not feel like you're making progress, have a look at that factor almost before you have a look at your program and start questioning that. The second thing is fuel. I will get Jack on the podcast here to be able to talk more eloquently about this. But if we think about our muscles being particularly made up of proteins and amino acids, if we do not have, once we've done the dose of exercise, the stressor, we've excreted those hormones, we're then going to need the building blocks to be able to then repair our body. And it's been shown time and time again that when you consume more protein, not necessarily exponentially, but if you consume more protein per kilo of your body weight, you will get more strength gains, you will put on more lean muscle, you'll be leaner and stronger, and you will repair better than those that don't. So that's the second thing I need to be looking at. And also more just generally at your gross calories or macros that you're bringing into your body. And then the last thing is more broadly your general stress and your life stresses. Again, argument with your partner, argument with your boss, unhappy family situations, whatever is going on in someone's life, that when you have that stress and you are releasing things like cortisol in your body, it's much harder for your body to want to repair and build new muscle, because we effectively have something on the right hand side here is seen as a threat. We need to protect, we need to basically bunker down, and your body, and building muscle and becoming like kind of self-actualized physically takes resources. So naturally those resources are going to be distributed elsewhere that does not include building lean muscle so that we can be more athletic and powerful. And it has been shown in a number of studies that highly stressed athletes respond to training a lot less than athletes that are less stressed. And that is with people that have doing the same amount of exercise with very similar schedules. So again, I hope this helps people understand, if you're thinking about starting a training program, why a coach might want to know what's going on in your life. They're going to be hopefully asking what challenges you may have, overcome, what's going on in other areas, and that is a key thing to try to address. I understand it's not very, very easy to begin with, but to be looking at and to be considering, how is this affecting something else in my life? So those are the kind of key three things. It's easy, they're broad ones, and they're not, when people talk about recovery, I know it's become a highly marketed, invested domain that people are, selling you shiny objects. But those are really the three key big rocks, pillars, tenets that you should be looking at to make sure you're getting the most out of the training that you're doing. So it's not just I need to do more training or I need to make my training more efficient. It's like, how can I be more efficient at amplifying that training effect? And I think when you are exercising and you are starting to do things that you have not done before, run faster, run further, lift heavier, whatever that might be, and you're exploring new things that you've not done before, that is going to be applying a stress to your body. So after a week to 2 weeks of really pushing the intensity and seeing what things you can accomplish, you should expect to come down. Like, what goes up must come down. And that's you can start beating yourself up. This is just speaking anecdotally here, that I've just done that, I really want to be able to do it again. I almost want to prove to myself that it wasn't a fluke and I've got this. But in reality, the way our body, we challenge our body, then we need to repair it. You should expect the next week or 2 weeks after some tough, hard training to be a bit average, and that is completely fine. We then just want to be able to do just enough training to allow ourselves not to detrain, but to be able to recover, so that when we start again banking more exercise, we then have another moment, and that moment will be better than the previous one, and all of a sudden you will be able to repeat that previous personal best because it is now submaximal. And I think more psychologically, and I do love some of the work by an author and a running coach, both Steve Magnus, and he talks a lot about creating the conditions for success. Do what you can to control the controllables, to look at your environment, to look at yourself, to get involved in the process, and to really try to detach yourself from the end results. And I understand that that's very difficult, but hopefully this reinforces for people that it's important when it comes to exercise and health that you find something that you find fun. Because if you find it fun, it's a skill that you can develop and you can learn. The reality is that you could become invested in learning that skill and gradually getting better at those skills, which, secondarily you get the effect. And then all of a sudden the results will come when they're ready. And that is such an important principle that if you just think about, right, if I do all the underlying things correctly, the results will follow if they're meant to be. I hope everybody enjoyed that episode. That is my really quick 15-minute précis on how to improve the chances of progression so that you can be as consistent as possible. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be absolutely delighted if you were able to subscribe. If you were to be able to leave a review for me, I will personally reach out and thank you. And if you do have any more questions, particularly around these topics, then you can find me at finley.evergreen.athlete on Instagram, and I'm very responsive there. And thank you very much again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.